Having successfully launched 3 businesses, bilingual mum to 2 and entrepreneur Antonia Bowes-Brown has connected with thousands of people, both French and international, since moving to the French Riviera. These connections allow her to speak with successful local businesses and inspirational people about life here on the Côte d'Azur and share it with you. Welcome to the Riviera Firefly podcast with your host, entrepreneur, and my mum, Antonia Bowes-Brown.
Welcome to 2018. The holiday period is well behind us now. I'm recording this towards the end of January, but I do hope that the changeover from 2017 to 18 was a happy one for you, and that the gastro and the flu and all the other sicknesses that were around are now out of the way and you're looking forward to a healthy 2018. For my part, I spent 2 weeks away from the rat race. We stayed here on the Côte d'Azur and we basically got out there exploring the Côte d'Azur, getting to the Christmas markets. And we got off fairly lightly in our house with the sickness, although we did run out of Fervex on Boxing Day, typically. So that meant going and queuing at the Pharmacie de Garde, the out-of-hours pharmacy, with every other sick person in the world. And after 40 minutes in the queue, this lady marched past us all to the front, demanding to be served, and the pharmacist stood up to her and said, "No, madame, you need to go to the back of the queue with all the other people." And she turned and looked at the queue and just then said, "I am not going to wait in that queue, I'll be here for at least an hour," and marched out of the shop, which gave us all quite a good giggle in the queue, in between all the coughs and sniffles. So we had quite a low-key Christmas period, went to the cinema quite a lot. I sort of feel that we're going through this bonanza from Hollywood right now. Every month there seems to be a new film that I want to go and see. And the beauty of living here on the Côte d'Azur is we have so many cinemas, from Nice to Grasse to Valbonne, Roquefort down to Cagnes, that show things in VO, so the version originale, the English language, for me, are the films that we go to see. And although I love a good French movie in French, I really love watching English-speaking films in English. So off we popped to see Murder in the Orient Express. That was down in Cannes. What amazing cinematography. Really does have to be seen on the big screen to be fully appreciated. Another huge favourite in our house was the latest Star Wars. Well, we went down to the Polygone in Cagnes-sur-Mer for that one. I can basically recite verbatim big chunks of the original Star Wars. I'm a huge fan, so is Mr. BB, and of course our kids could not escape that. So we really enjoyed going to see that on opening night down in Cagnes-sur-Mer. Wonder was another film that has just come from a book. It was a book actually that I shared with my book club about a year ago now, and it's a book that was written for tweens, I think, but it really does touch you in an amazing way. In fact, I cried in that book. And so we went to see that one in Roquefort in the Pavillon Bleu, and it is a film that every teen and tween needs to see, and their parents too. And this weekend we just went to see Churchill's Darkest Hour, and what a splendid performance from the cast of that. To give you an idea, that cost us €24 for 2 adults and 2 kids, and I really think that is money well spent, to be able to go and see a film here on the big screen in the English language. I've still got a list to get through. I want to go and see 3 Banners. The Greatest Showman, I hear, is incredible, and The Post, well, I have to go and see that one too. Big fan of Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and I just think it's perfect timing in this Trump era to be able to go and see a film that's going to raise some questions. So we need to keep supporting all these cinemas that are showing things in VO. Stop streaming, guys. Go and get out there. Make an event of it. You can find out the latest on the Riviera Radio website. They have a What's On guide, and I'm going to put that link in the show notes so that you can easily find your film in VO. Sometimes you have to travel a bit. You might have to go into Nice or down to Cannes. But I just think we do need to support them so that they keep bringing more and more films in VO to us. Also, you've got, if you're into live theatre, you've got the TNN, the Théatre National de Nice, in Nice. Beautiful old theatre, real vintage, feels like you're stepping back in time, but with all the modern cons, of course. And it's just a real proper night out. Irina Brook there I think she's bilingual, English-French, and she's certainly spent time out in the States. She brings many productions to the stage in English, and it gets subtitled on a screen into French. Well, that's huge for us down here to be able to have live theatre in English. And the prices are really reasonable, so I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. Do go and support the local arts. Films and theatre are such an important part of the arts world, and you do get really inspired from it. Orient Express maybe want to go and travel, and who knows, maybe even on board one day. That would be quite fun, get down to Venice on the Orient Express. Wonder made us think about disabilities and differences and what we should be doing to solve prejudices, and I do think that that is a film that should actually be obligatory in the primary school. I wonder if Aseika could make that book be obligatory and on their curriculum in the CIV, Sartou and Trois Collines schools. I always find that the transition between years is a period of reflection for me personally. Now, of course, I do know some people really don't want to know about the change of year, and I totally respect that. But for me, I like to look back over the past year, remembering the highs, enjoying them, looking through some photos. I don't really waste too much time regretting the past. I can't change it, so it doesn't seem like a good use of my time or energy. So any lows, any bad moments, I try to turn them into learning opportunities and think, how could I have done that differently? What will I do in the future? Because I can have an effect on that. And while I was in this reflective phase, I took some time out to read Sir Ken Robinson's Out of Our Minds. Now, if you don't know him, go and search for him on TED Talks. I'll put a link in the show notes. I find him so inspirational. He sums up in a nutshell what so many people, so many parents think is wrong in today's society, particularly in the schools. But it's also what employers are complaining about in the workplace. Everyone is talking about STEM. So they're talking about the sciences and the technology and engineering and maths, but we really should be thinking about STEAM with an A in there for the arts, because the focus really isn't on that anymore. We're educating kids from the waist up, and by that we're just sort of thinking not about moving, not about expressing yourself, but only about being brainy and being able to do maths. And it's very interesting that he says in his book, most children think they're highly creative. I certainly see that at Kidderland. But if you went and did a little poll with your friends, your adult friends, you'd probably find that most adults think they're not creative. I ran a little test on my own Facebook, personal Facebook, and it was really quite illuminating because lots of the people that replied felt they were creative as kids, but they had grown out of it. Various reasons. One was lack of self-belief. I'm never going to be the next Keith Moon, and so I kind of gave up that dream on the drums. In these time-challenged times, felt that it was a lack of time, and you know, we have our home life, we have our work life, and getting that balance, in fact there isn't really ever a balance, is there, but getting that me time and doing something personally for you that's creative is something that falls by the wayside. One of my other friends said that they'd been very imaginative and creative as a child, and that suddenly came to a stop, and so later on as an adult they actually had to relearn it. He went on to say actually that creativity is more than just art, acting and dance and music. And yes, you can apply it to every walk of life. You could be a kitchen designer. You could be the guy that lays the wall out in a garden. That requires creativity. You might be a janitor in a school who has to reorganize the storage space. Again, you've got to think creatively. And in technology, we're constantly looking at new ways to do things, to deliver what we've been doing before, but to improve it with technological advances. And this global revolution that we're going through, the change that we're going through, is incredible. I was just watching Matthew Broderick in Wargames the other day with the kids. One of my friends said it was a really great example of how things were for the younger generation to have a look at and to compare how things are evolving from pre-Google to post-Google times. For example, phone directories. Matthew Broderick has to go and find a phone directory and look things up, not just whip out his phone and ask Siri. the size of computers in Wargames, absolutely huge, and now they've got this tiny little thing that fits in their back pocket. It was a good reminder of the revolution that we're going through and how things are changing. And we need to think about what this means in education for future generations. And what's blatantly clear right now is that in order to survive, we do need to be thinking creativity in the workplace, but also think about it in your personal life, because that's ultimately going to help you in the workplace too. Jobs that we knew to be safe are not going to be around for that much longer. Things like law is apparently going to change hugely with the advancement of AI, artificial intelligence. Our grandchildren might never know what it's like to drive a car. And in one hand, I find that really quite sad. But on another, I kind of am looking forward to being able to sometimes have journeys where I don't have to think about it and I can get on with catching up on an email or reading a book. But the speed that technology is changing our world, it's really fast, and we need to keep up with it. Thomas Friedman, he's the author of The World is Flat, said that those that have the ability to imagine new services and new opportunities and new ways to recruit work, they're going to be the new untouchables. And certainly that's a message that I am trying to pass on to my teens. So how do we keep those creative juices flowing? Well, if you're not fortunate enough to have kept up with your creativity over the years, then you may have to relearn how to be creative. And there are three core purposes to this. So the first one is personal. So here's an example. My mum loves to paint, and it's mainly self-taught. She likes doing seascapes, she likes painting furniture, and just being creative. So with the new year, we spent some time chatting about, with the end of 2018 in mind, what did she want to do? What experiences would she like to look back on in December and say, oh yeah, that was brilliant, I really enjoyed doing that. And so with a little encouragement, she decided to go for one of these activities, which was to go to an art class in the Hangar Art Club in Opio. And that's no mean feat for her, actually, because she doesn't drive here in France, and, well, public transport isn't the easiest to use, particularly if you're out of the big cities. It's not very frequent, and, walking, you can't really walk from A to B that easily because there's just no pavements and people seem to drive quite quickly. Anyway, we found out a way to get her there and back, and she had a lovely time. She got creative, and I hope she'll be going back. So that's an example with a tick. There's something hugely satisfying about creating. So from a personal experience, I joined in Heinen Wietzi's furniture painting course a year ago now, in Lorg, beautiful place. And you can actually go back and hear them. I interviewed them, their fab story and what brought them to the Côte d'Azur in one of my very early episodes, back in episode 8. But that's, a one-off that you can go and do. You can go and do midweek or on a weekend. Just sign up for a workshop similar to the one I did with Heinen Wietzi. And just have a day to yourself of being creative. Upcycling, repurposing something that was old to be something new. It can give you a great boost. And is something that we actually were talking about in one of my groups, Home and Garden Côte d'Azur. So come and join us in that group if you are feeling a tiny bit inspired, or maybe you're looking for inspiration. We can share some ideas in there of things that we're going to do. I have some old cupboard doors. They're not very big, quite small. And so I had a look on Pinterest, what can you do with old cupboard doors, and found some great ideas there. I'm going to make them into trays. So I just need to get some handles and repaint these doors. They're only about 60 centimetres long. And I'm going to make the drawers that were in there into key racks. So I'll post the pictures in that group when I'm done. Now, I know that other people who listen to this podcast heard my interview with Lizzie Parks. That was in episode 6, and Vonnie Marshall-Edwards in episode 26. And they then went and signed up for the Big Blaze Choir and singing lessons. And that's another way of being creative. I know Mr. BB, he does the Big Blaze Choir, and he absolutely loves that moment of getting out there and expressing yourself. There's also a knitting shop called Rêve et Création in Varbonne. And they run apéro nights. So you go along, you have a little glass of wine or whatever, and you do some knitting. And it's all in French, so that's really 2 for the price of 1. So there are many ideas of things that you could do out there for you personally. Now, the second purpose in creativity is cultural. And we have no lack of ideas or places that you can go for here on the Côte d'Azur to tick the cultural box. Everywhere you turn here on the Côte d'Azur, you've got some amazing culture. And if you go back through previous episodes, I've talked about some of my recent favourite museum outings. I think it was in episode 23 with Claudia, where we were chatting about harmonising the body and spirit. I talked about Mougins and Nice and some museums I went to. They were brilliant. And so do go out and ask our amazing community in Côte d'Azur Living for some ideas. There's about 8,000 members in that group, and if you post what you're looking for, the kind of thing that you want to do, maybe your age, the size of your group, what area, I'm sure one of our members in that group will come up with a fabulous suggestion for you. The final purpose in creativity is economic. And did you know that our region, PACA, is virtually made up totally of auto-entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, people running their own businesses? The majority here are small businesses, people like you and me who had an idea and they set it up. It's very particular to this region. It makes us quite atypical, in fact. I wondered actually if it was because there are so many internationals that have gravitated towards this area and rather than join a local company, set up their own company. And what incredible innovation and imagination we have down here. And the passion of these small commerçants and their drive to create is the lifeblood of the south of France. But we can't stay treading water. We need to keep moving forward, tweaking things, and moving with the times. So 2018, the new year, well, it signals a fresh start. It's a moment that you can take stock and say, okay, what am I going to do this year? And I really like that approach that I did with my mum, with the end in sight. So yes, imagine you're at a New Year's Eve party at the end of this year, looking back at what you would like to think, yes, I did that. I'm really proud of that. So how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your home and your business or career? And take stock without getting maudlin about 2017. Look at lessons learned and how you can grow. Now, like so many of us, and you are a rare unicorn if this doesn't happen to you, your inner self can be your very unbest friend at times, because your inner self sometimes will be there going, well, you can't do that because X, Y, Z. And so there is a really great way to do this, to tell yourself the rules. And you sort of say, if money was no object, because you actually don't know. You may come into some money, you might win the lottery, a competition, someone may just give you something, you just don't know. So if money was no object, what would you do? Your inner self may also go, you don't have time. Well, ultimately, we do have time. It's just that we are choosing to do something else with it instead. So again, put that out of your mind for the moment and just do a kind of brainstorm on, if money was no object and if I had all the time, what do I want to do this year? You may also have the inner self going, well, people might think that, or I'm not good enough. And I'm sure you can fill in blanks that your inner self tells you. Just tell your inner self to be quiet. Get those ideas and wishes and wants down on paper. And if you give yourself some time and you relax, the ideas will come to you on how you can make it possible. And you can say to your inner self, okay, I've heard you, now be quiet. It's quite a powerful thing to do. If you're a visual person, which I am, and let's face it, lots of us must be, otherwise Pinterest wouldn't be doing so well, you can either make yourself a board in Pinterest or make a real one if you prefer paper and glue. I actually do both. And get your ideas that you've brainstormed down, those projects, those plans, down into something visual in a place that you keep looking at, that you'd go back to. It's a beautiful creative process to go through. I spent about an hour going on the internet, printing off some pictures, and made a big A3 poster board and hung it up on the back of my office door at Kidderland. And it catches my eye every day. No one else knows it's there, but it gives me a little thrill and a boost. And if you're ever in the area, pop by for a coffee and I'll show you mine. Next session, I'm going to be chatting with an executive coach, and she's also a creative workshopper. She's a photographer and soon-to-be author, Barbara Wilson. And I really enjoyed my chat with her about coaching, but also about creativity and the power of it. So be sure to check back in a week to listen to that one. She actually reminded me that I needed to go and look up the words of Logical by Supertramp. Go and check it out. It really resonates with me. I don't think I want to be 100% sensible. I don't want to be logical, responsible, or practical. But I do think I want to get more creative. So that's definitely in my vision boards for this year. I also like to think about how I'm going to develop professionally this year. How I'm going to be learning, and I'm going to kick that off myself by going to a free TEDx style event. So this is in Nice in January, and they've got some speakers that are going to have 10 minutes to share their message, and it's totally different topics. You know, not all of them appeal to me, but there are some there that are interesting, like mindset, publishing a book, you are what you eat. And I just think that day away from the office is going to give my mind some time to wake up post Christmas, and really I think I'm going to come out of there buzzing. So I found this through a friend actually, but on Eventbrite. And it's a really cool website. I found after that one lots of cheap and even free events that appealed to me. So things like, as a leader, go and do team building so that you could bring it back to your workplace. I even saw there's a day's training in Fragonard, how to become a nose. And I thought that was really cool too. Just doing things that are a bit different. I feel in the workplace there's a shift right now in the business world to be more supportive and collaborative, more than ever before. I joined about in 2015 a US-based group called BizChicks, and gradually got a bit more involved in that. And it's a beautiful community actually, where I can get lots of help and support and guidance for any work-related, but also just as a woman in business, any issues. And I found that a great resource over the years. Over here in France, I belong to a couple of small networking groups that I can link into. We coach, we mastermind, we help each other, and we become stronger through it. And Riviera Firefly Cocoon is one of those groups where people are starting to network together and to support each other. So we'd love to see you in there if you run your own business, whether you're an auto entrepreneur or you're much bigger. I think the new year is also a moment where we can look at the next 12 months and say, how am I going to make a positive impact on those around me? So the community, the environment, that's that concept of pay it forward. I just joined a Facebook group called Living Without Plastic France, and I'll put that link in the show notes because this is something that has suddenly become mainstream, and it's an area I would like to focus on in my home life. Of course we recycle. Of course we compost. It's things that we've been doing for years. And in fact, I had to go through many hoops to get our recycling bin reinstalled outside Kidderland. I still struggle with composting food scraps in the garden, as we kind of get lots of little visitors, and this freaks the kids out as they don't then want to go out to the bin to take more out to the composter because they're worried about what they're going to see when they open the lid. And if you have any tips on how we can solve that problem, I'd love to hear about it in Home and Garden. The problem with plastic, going back to that, is that it is such a huge issue. We actually stopped buying water bottles a good 3 years ago now. And I was a real San Pellegrino lover, so that was quite a personal sacrifice to me in the sort of first world problem area. But you do adapt, and so now I just drink ginger infusions all day long. But I do miss that, and I have seen that people are switching to soda streams, and we haven't done that yet because I just think my kids would be drinking cola all the time. But yeah, so I've switched to ginger infusions, and we've stopped all that plastic. But I think that it is really quite challenging to buy products that are not in plastic containers, especially if you're time poor like me, because I just don't have time to go around several shops. It just isn't going to work for me. I'm going to keep a close eye on this group and hope that with more pressure from us as consumers, that all the mainstream shops will start to change what they're doing and how they're packaging. So go and join that group. I was actually watching a few extracts from the documentary Cowspiracy at the weekend, and the statistics of how much water is required to make one burger still really blows me away. I really cannot believe that. I shared it with Mr. Beebe, and he too couldn't believe how much water is wasted, in a way, on making one burger, and even said, maybe we should look at consuming less meat at home. We're not big meat eaters, it's just Mr. BB and Master L that do that. I've always struggled with the idea that we spray drinking water onto our gardens. It's kind of crazy with all the grey water that goes down the drain that we can't use that water easily to water lawns, but I guess it's because of all the soaps and the suds. Must be hygiene. It wouldn't do any good. We have 2 vegetarians in our house already, and in the evenings we don't really eat much. I tell the boys to eat it at lunch so that we don't have to make many meals when it comes to the evening. And I was reading about vegetarianism and veganism at the weekend because, I've got a teenager and I was a bit reluctant to sort of accept her decision. Obviously, I can't force her to eat meat, and she still is eating fish. So I was researching a little bit about that, trying to make sure that we've got the absolute best diet going on. It was very interesting to read this article about how it is becoming much more mainstream now, and how the big thinkers think it is going to be here to stay, which is actually a relief that it's becoming more mainstream, because over the years since I became vegetarian, you would not believe how many people become self-professed nutritionists when they hear that you're vegetarian and start giving you advice on what you should be eating. It's not something I would do the other way around to them. Anyway, I digress. Obviously, you need to think about things like vitamin B12, and so do check out the Vegetarian Society. They had some great PDFs that you can get for free, particularly for teenagers, actually, because many of the millennials are actually turning their back on the over-farmed meat and fish industries. And I think this is probably in part down to social media and the amount of shameful videos that are circulating on how meat is produced and the conditions that animals live in. And thankfully, things are changing. Times are changing, and the millennials and the future generation, they are not going to stand for that anymore. I think back to when I came to France as a veggie au pair back in '88, and what was on offer. It was really challenging to be a non-meat eater. And what we can find now in the supermarkets with the sans viande option, even in the last couple of months, I think it's become much, much more mainstream. I strongly believe that if you are a meat eater, and that is your choice, I am not going to try and change you in the same way that I hope you're going to respect my choice of what I eat. But I just think that we do all need to be thinking more about the question of provenance. Is that meat pumped full of chemicals and hormones? Why is that cheap as chips chicken? Why is it that price? Is that really worth it? I think it's a lot easier in France to get good quality meat. I think you can get great organic options here. Looking for the label rouge is also a really good bet. And the local butchers here, I think, is a great place to go and start. You can sometimes get free bones for your dogs there as well. And of course, many of them don't use plastic. They wrap it up in that wax-like paper. So that's a kind of win-win for provenance and for the environment. So I hope that gives you some food for thought. So if you're not into resolutions per se, how about just one word that sums up how you're going to approach the year? I did it that way because I don't really remember tons of resolutions. So I wrote mine down on a large pebble, and that sits on my desk and catches my eye when I go to do an email or answer the phone. Well, I did decide I actually needed 2 words. I couldn't just manage on one. So I got one of those little washer bracelets made and had it stamped with my second word. So now I have believe, because I need to believe in myself in those self-doubting moments where your inner self tells you that you can't do something. And I want my focus to be grow, so to grow my business and to grow myself professionally and personally. So believe and grow are my 2 words for the year. Well, I would love to hear what you've got on your agenda for 2018. It can be personally or professionally. So if it's personal, put it in Côte d'Azur Living, and if it's professional, go to the Riviera Firefly Cocoon. I hope 2018 is going to be one where you believe in yourselves and you are able to grow, be it personally or professionally. Till the next time, au revoir les fireflies!
This episode was brought to you by Riviera Firefly for Côte d'Azur Living by your your host and my mum, Antonia Beauvoisin Brown. Please subscribe, like and share. Until the next time, au revoir les fireflies!